After 10 years of liking Felipe, I finally felt it was completely pointless. I stopped clinging to him, returned the gifts he gave me, and rejected all of his invitations. 1 month, 2 months passed, and I didn't appear in front of him at all, until a friend posted a picture. In the dim lighting, a pale hand rested on the lean side of a man's waist. At the spot where the fingers touched, tattooed my name. The sexual tension was undeniable. Felipe finally couldn't take it anymore and came to reconcile, only to find me in the arms of another man, being kissed so passionately that I nearly lost control. The man raised an eyebrow at him and said, "What's the matter? Do you have a fetish for watching other people make out?" Chapter 1. When Felipe noticed that my phone's wallpaper was a picture of him, he gave me a half smile and asked, "Do you like me? Are you serious?" I bit my lip, blushing, and nodded. He stood by the window in the hallway, the neon lights casting shadows on his face, making him look a little blurry. "But Alice, you're not my type. I've always thought of you as a little sister." Sister? For a moment, I thought I must have heard wrong. How could I be his sister? For as long as I can remember, Felipe has always been by my side, so close that whenever I turned around, he was there. When the pressure of the college entrance exam caused me to break out, he personally prepared a meal plan for me, tutored me, and even accompanied me to the exam. When I was robbed while abroad and shed a single tear, he flew to me on his private jet. "Why are you crying? You've got your brother's shoulder to lean on." When one of his business partners made flirtatious remarks toward me, he politely ruined the man's deal and then bankrupted him. "I can't even bear to say a harsh word to you. How dare he treat you like that?" When I threw a tantrum with my family because I didn't want to take over the family business, he stood in front of everyone and pulled me to his side, protecting me. "What are you afraid of? If she doesn't want to do anything in the future, I'll take care of her." His absolute favoritism was reserved for me alone. Isn't this love? Would a brother really treat his sister this way? Chapter 2. I refuse to give up. "But I don't want to be your sister." Felipe lit a cigarette and sighed helplessly. "Alice, I want us to keep things the way they are." He slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. I sniffled and coughed twice, and he quickly put out the cigarette, lowering his eyes to look at me. "Lovers break up, but family ties last forever. Do you understand?" I shook my head. "You're still young. You can't tell the difference between love and habit or dependence. Try dating a few people. You'll figure it out." I gripped his hand tightly. "Felipe, I can tell the difference. I've liked you for a long time. I don't want to be your sister. I want to be your girlfriend. Can't you give me a chance?" This was my all-in gamble, risking my pride, but he remained silent. Silence was an answer too. Tears uncontrollably streamed down my face. He just looked at me, a trace of impatience flickering in his eyes. By the time I finished crying, I suddenly felt tired, and I suddenly felt ridiculous, like a child trying to win attention by crying. This version of myself was too pathetic. I slowly stopped crying. Felipe pulled his hand away. It seemed like he was trying to make sure I would completely give up on this relationship, or maybe on him altogether. The smile at the corners of his mouth gradually faded, and his entire demeanor radiated a cold indifference, as if he couldn't be bothered to deal with me. "Alice, girls who throw themselves at someone lose all their value." The words I wanted to say got stuck in my throat. This was the end of the conversation. Saying anything more would only make me feel even more embarrassed. So, I forced a smile. "Got it, Felipe." I didn't cling to him. I wiped my own tears away. The air was so still that all I could hear was the pattering of rain outside. "Do you want me to give you a ride?" I shook my head. "No need." He seemed like he wanted to say something else, but instead just nodded curtly. "Take care of yourself." "Okay." With that, I turned and walked away. Chapter 3. I took a cab back to school, and the rain was still falling. Using my bag to shield my head, I huddled under the school gate to avoid the rain. I was soaked. I wiped my face, unsure if it was rain or tears. Just as I was about to rush back into the downpour, an umbrella was held out in front of me. I looked up. It was one of my classmates. His name was Jacob. I accepted his kind offer. but I didn't expect that I'd still end up with a fever, half asleep in the middle of the night, burning up. I thought, maybe this is the pain of heartbreak. Maybe you need to go through a shattering illness to fully recover. On the way home that weekend, my mom called me, "Sweetheart, have the driver take you to Felipe's house first. We're having dinner there today." Thinking about Felipe's face, I refused. "Mom, I'm not feeling well. I don't want to go. Felipe's family is celebrating something today. Just stop by and show your face. Then you can go home, okay?" I thought about it and agreed. After I hung up, my childhood friend Fiona sent me a picture. "Felipe bought you a necklace. Big spender. P.S. If you already got it, forget I said anything. My friend saw him at the auction last week and sent me this. Why didn't you post about it?" My heart leapt into my throat. I had loved that necklace for a long time and had mentioned it to Felipe before. But when I stepped into Felipe's house, I saw that the necklace was on someone else's neck. It was Julia. My mind went blank for a moment. It wasn't until she greeted me with a smile that I snapped out of it. "Alice, you've grown up. You're looking more and more beautiful." I forced a smile, holding back my emotions. "Hello, Julia." Julia was exceptional. She was the same age as Felipe, and among our group, she was one of the few who could match him in status and ability. Felipe had always admired her. At this moment, even if I were naive, I could tell that today's gathering was set up by the elders to bring the two of them together. I wasn't too upset. I was just wondering, why that necklace? Why did it have to be that necklace? I looked up, and my eyes met Felipe's. He frowned slightly, quickly averting his gaze. It seemed like he wasn't pleased with my presence. After all, we had already laid everything bare, and I shouldn't have been so clueless as to show up at his arranged date. In the past, when rumors about the two of them circulated, I had tested the waters by asking Felipe if there was any possibility. He said that he and Julia were too alike, both strong-willed, which made them good partners in business. Back then, I foolishly thought that since I had a softer personality, we complemented each other well. It was all my wishful thinking. I didn't stay until the end of the gathering. Later, I replied to Fiona, the necklace wasn't for me, and after finding out about my feelings for him, he rejected me. Chapter 4. I started packing away the gifts Felipe had given me. On the video call, Fiona chatted on. "He rejected you? Oh, come on. No way. He said he sees me as a sister and doesn't want to cross that line." The box I was holding contained a gift Felipe had brought back from Pakistan. He had gone there for business, and though he could have returned earlier, he stayed an extra day just to buy something for me. In the end, he got caught in a terrorist attack. While we were on a video call, stray bullets exploded behind him, and the connection was cut off. I didn't sleep at all that night, my pillow soaked with tears, preparing to fly out and find him. But the next day, he showed up in front of me with that gift in hand. There was still a wound on his forehead, and when he saw my swollen, tear-streaked eyes, he gently rubbed my cheek. "I'm not dead yet. See? I came back safe and sound." I threw myself into his arms, unable to calm down for a long time. "Sister? That's ridiculous. Does Felipe really believe that? We grew up together too. And look how differently he treats you compared to us." Back then, I also thought it was his favoritism toward me, a little romantic secret between us. But now, I don't think that anymore. To Felipe, I was a sister, a relative, a part of his family, but never his lover. Feeling a bit suffocated, I walked out onto the balcony. That's when I saw Felipe in his garden, standing under the large tree on the ground floor. Felipe and Julia were standing very close together. It almost looked like they were kissing. Out of the corner of his eye, Felipe seemed to glance in my direction, like a voyeur who had been caught. I quickly stepped back into the room. Suddenly, I found everything pointless. As I pulled the curtains closed, a bitter thought crossed my mind. Was Felipe doing this on purpose? Trying to make sure I completely gave up on him? But what he didn't know was that my heart had already died on that rainy day. Chapter 5. I didn't pay any more attention to them after that. I was only thinking of finding a chance to return all the gifts Felipe had given me. Fiona's birthday was celebrated at one of our usual places. When I arrived, our friend Dominic had just walked in from outside. I saw Felipe next door having dinner. I invited him over, but he said he'd cover the bill and wouldn't join us. Guess who he's having dinner with? He had a gossiping expression, and Fiona, trying to spare my feelings, was just about to cover his mouth. But it was too late, he had already said it. With Julia! Can you believe it? The two most successful people in our group finally got together. Wait, but what about Alice? Can you stop talking for once? Is it really that hard? Fiona threw a cushion at him. Dominic looked confused. Fiona, what's up with you? Did you eat a bomb or something? I'm just saying, Alice. Why are you so worked up? Fiona rolled her eyes at him and turned to comfort me. Alice, don't be upset. Men come and go. Out with the old, in with the new. I smiled. It's your birthday. Don't worry about me. My birthday wish is for my best friend to be happy. Forget about Felipe. Does he even realize how rare it is to love someone for so many years? What a fool. Listen, here's my advice. Go book a male model. Make him dote on you. Revolve his whole world around you. Trust me, you'll be so into it, you won't even think about Felipe anymore. And then, let Felipe regret it. Even if he were a god, you wouldn't give him a second glance. A male model? Regret? Fiona, what kind of wild ideas are you coming up with now? Dominic chimed in. As they argued, I stepped out for some fresh air. Looking down, I saw a familiar figure being surrounded in the alley below. His arms were covered in cuts, and his clothes were torn. When he lifted his face, I realized it was Jacob. Chapter 6. We had been classmates for 3 years, and I never imagined Jacob's family was struggling so much. I saved him. Then, I gave him some money to help pay off his debts. The rest, use it to cover your grandma's medical bills. It was my way of repaying the favor for that umbrella on that rainy day. He stood there, stunned, his eyes slowly turning red. The young man clenched his fists tightly, veins bulging. His pale skin, illuminated by the streetlight, seemed fragile, almost shattered. He said he would pay me back as soon as possible, or if I ever needed anything, I could always come to him. Sometimes, fate works in strange ways between people, or maybe, when you look back on a decision, you realize you don't even know what made you make it at the time. And that's how Jacob, somewhat unintentionally, became my first boyfriend. In my mind, he had always been cool and aloof. I'd heard from my roommates that his name often appeared on the confession wall, but he was never focused on that. Instead, he had started working on a business venture with some seniors early on. He had won numerous awards in entrepreneurship competitions and was top of the class in his major, always with his own goals. Very distant from me. Back then, my life consisted of nothing more than completing my studies and staying close to Felipe. So now, with the roles reversed, I was curious, what would it be like in a relationship where someone is endlessly attentive and only has eyes for you? Would it make me feel cheap? By senior year, there were fewer courses, and Jacob fulfilled his role perfectly. When we were together, he was always the one to take the lead. Despite being busy with his career, he still prioritized me, even though our relationship had initially been built on money. 1 month, 2 months passed, and with hormones running high, we started holding hands, hugging, and acting like a normal couple. I didn't try to reach out to Felipe anymore. Fiona told me that she and Dominic once ran into him while out. He asked about me. Fiona accidentally let it slip that I was dating someone. Felipe's face turned dark, and after giving us a cold laugh, he didn't even say goodbye and just left. What do you think that means? I didn't know, but that night, I did receive a message from him. So, you've finally made something of yourself. It seemed vague and out of context, so I didn't reply. By then, quite some time had passed. When he called, Jacob and I had just left the library. Are you on campus? In the sunlight, Jacob held up an umbrella for me, quietly turning his head away. He was giving me space. I hummed in acknowledgement. Even though Felipe and I weren't lovers, the relationship between our families made it impossible for us to become enemies. Besides, he hadn't really done anything wrong to me. He just didn't like me. That's all. I'm at the university for a forum and happened to pick up your favorite little cakes, he said in the same tone as always, as if my confession had been just a trivial moment in the past. I wasn't paying attention and tripped over a small stone on the path. Jacob quickly caught me, softly reminding me, "Careful." Coming back to my senses, I declined Felipe's offer. "No need, Felipe. I'm on a diet and cutting out sugar." There was a moment of silence before he spoke again, his voice carrying a faint, almost imperceptible tremor. "How about we grab a meal instead? I've already made lunch plans with my boyfriend." For a long moment, there was no sound from his end. Then I heard his increasingly heavy breathing, laced with disbelief. "Boy, friend? Felipe, Fiona wasn't lying to you. I really do have a boyfriend." Chapter 7. As I turned the corner, I saw Felipe standing in front of my dorm. His refined presence drew the attention of every girl who passed by. He saw me too. He walked toward me with long strides. I hung up the phone, pursed my lips, and greeted him. "Felipe, Alice, aren't you going to introduce us?" Was it just my imagination, or was there a hint of gritted teeth in his voice? Before I could answer, Jacob interlaced his fingers with mine, holding my hand in a firm grip, as if trying to make me a part of him. With his usual politeness and a gentle tone, Jacob spoke. "Hello, I'm Jacob." Felipe's expression remained cold as he looked at Jacob, though the bag of desserts in his hand was now crushed out of shape. He shifted his gaze to me, raising an eyebrow. "Why don't you tell him who I am?" For a moment, I was completely baffled. What did that mean? Feeling uncomfortable under his intense gaze, I reluctantly turned to Jacob. "This is my neighbor, Felipe." As soon as I said the words, the bag slipped from Felipe's hand, and the dessert scattered across the ground. I heard Felipe's strained voice. "Neighbor?" Something I said must have hurt him. That day, Felipe gave me a look I'd never seen before, an unfamiliar and pained expression, before walking away, looking utterly lost. Chapter 8. The northern weather turned cold quickly, and this year, the snow came early. Fiona invited me to go skiing, and I brought Jacob along. On the bus ride up the mountain, Jacob handed me a warm pack. When we got off the bus, he discreetly wrapped a scarf around my neck, bundling me up snugly. Snowflakes fell on his hair, on his eyelashes, covering him with a light dusting of white. I smiled. "Jacob, your eyelashes are so long. Has anyone ever told you that?" He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "No." "Well, now someone has. Do you think we could balance a matchstick on them?" After putting a hat on me, he lowered his lashes. "You can try later. For now, give me your hands so I can help you with your gloves." I obediently stretched out my hands. Jacob was that kind of person, attentive, thoughtful, and gentle. Most importantly, he was emotionally stable. Being with him made me feel safe. This was the first time I'd introduced him to my friends. Fiona was the most excited, pulling me aside to whisper, "Alice, your boyfriend is way too handsome." "I told you, the best way to get over one relationship is to start a new one. Oh, by the way, Felipe is here too, but it looks like he's busy with business." I nodded. After all, we were part of the same social circle, so it was impossible to completely avoid seeing him. If I tried too hard, it would just make it seem like I still cared. Jacob brought over a thermos cup. "You were coughing earlier. Drink something warm to soothe your throat." I smiled at him. "You and Fiona should go get your gear. I'll watch you ski." To be honest, I'm pretty terrible at sports, and after all these years, I still hadn't learned how to ski. "I'll take you skiing." His gaze was intense, and he didn't seem to be joking. "You're good at it?" "Very good," he said, without the slightest hint of modesty. Feeling tempted, I got changed into my ski gear along with him. Fiona and Dominic were already having a blast on the slopes. They looked so cool, racing down in the sunset glow. Maybe Jacob noticed the envy in my eyes, because after helping me put on my goggles, he tucked my hair into my hat. "I'll hold you while we ski." "Huh?" Jacob had already adjusted his gear and held out his hand to me. Dressed in black ski clothes, his 6 feet 2 inches frame looked even taller. Before I realized it, I was clinging to him, holding on tightly around his neck. Jacob, I'm heavy. You're not. You should eat more. Jacob, are you sure about this? Trust me. He lifted me by my legs, and we were so close that the only sound I could hear was our mingling breaths. Dominic and Fiona whistled at us. For some reason, my face started to heat up. Are you ready? Jacob's low, gentle voice sounded in my ear. Yes. Then let's go. The moment we began to slide, I couldn't help but scream, Jacob! I'm here. Aw. Jacob! Alice. Look at the sunset. It's beautiful. I never knew Jacob was such a skilled skier. Later, he took me skiing in all sorts of ways, letting me experience it to the fullest. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, I suddenly felt someone's gaze on me. I glanced to the side and saw Felipe. Chapter 9. I didn't know when Felipe had arrived, but he was already dressed in ski gear. I remembered the past. It was always Felipe who taught me how to ski. He was patient, holding my hand and teaching me over and over, but I still couldn't get the hang of it. Every time our friends laughed at me, Felipe would scoff at them. Go play somewhere else. Don't distract my Alice from learning. In truth, Felipe was right. Reliance and habit do fade with time. Now, I don't need him anymore. The others started cheering for Felipe and Jacob to race. After all, they were the best skiers there. I grabbed Jacob's hand and shook my head. Felipe made a clicking sound in annoyance. What's the matter? Afraid I'll beat him? Don't worry. Jacob squeezed my hand. All right, be careful. Felipe's expression immediately darkened. His gaze fixed on our joined hands, growing more intense, as if he could burn a hole through me. They took the ski lift up, and Fiona came over to me. I don't get it. Why would Felipe agree to this race? Is he jealous? I shook my head. I don't know. Wasn't he the one who told me to date a few people and see what it's like? Besides, would a brother get jealous over his sister? When the race started, the crowd erupted in cheers. I found myself silently rooting for Jacob. After all, Felipe was an expert skier. At first, everything seemed fine, but halfway through, Felipe and Jacob got closer and closer. As they neared the finish line, Felipe was slightly behind. Then, his ski accidentally, perhaps not so accidentally, hit Jacob's. Jacob fell. Felipe crossed the finish line first. Only those who have skied know how painful it is to fall at such high speed. Alice, look. Felipe skied over to me, as if he was about to say something smug, like the person I'd chosen was weak. Not worth my time. But I just looked at him coldly. Was that fun? Felipe, was it worth it? Ignoring the shock in his eyes, I rushed over to Jacob. Are you okay? It doesn't hurt. I'm fine. How could he be fine? He couldn't even stand up. I'm really okay. Jacob remained gentle, but I could see his hands and legs trembling. Normally, I have a good temper and a soft personality, but now it felt like there was a fire burning in my chest. I ran back over to Felipe, apologized to him. Him? Felipe looked like he had just heard the most ridiculous thing. Alice, do you even know what you're saying? I do. Felipe, you knocked him down. I saw it. So what? You're going to take the side of someone you barely know over me? I stared at him in silence. Felipe's brow furrowed deeply as he looked at me in disbelief. Alice, do you? I cut him off. I like him. Is that so hard to believe? And by the way, he's not someone I just met. I've known him for a long time. I spoke each word clearly. His name is Jacob, and he's my boyfriend now. For a moment, everything went silent. So silent that even our friends held their breath. Everyone knew that for years. My eyes had only been on Felipe. I was his little shadow. Everyone assumed that eventually, at the right time, we'd end up together. I thought so too. But everyone missed one important detail. If someone truly likes you, why would they make you wait? The tension hung in the air. Fiona nudged Dominic, trying to get him to pull Felipe away. But Felipe, his eyes reddening with anger, lashed out. He kicked over his snowboard, sending snow flying into the air. Then he shouted at me, "Fine. All these years, I've wasted my time caring about you." With that, he stormed off. disappearing into the wind and snow. I went back and slowly helped Jacob to his feet. Chapter 10. The private ski resort had its own medical team. After an examination, they found that Jacob had a few soft tissue injuries, and his knee and ankle were slightly dislocated. Throughout it all, Jacob remained calm and gentle, reassuring me not to worry. Even when the doctors were resetting his dislocated bones, Jacob didn't make a sound. I felt a sting in my nose, and after the doctors left, I sat beside him. I'm sorry. I didn't know something like this would happen. I also didn't know that Felipe would do something like that. In the soft, warm light, Jacob's gaze was especially gentle. He held my hand and gave it a reassuring pat. It's okay, Alice. Thank you for bringing me to meet your friends. I'm really happy. Jacob was always like this, always gentle. When I left his room, I ran into Felipe leaning against the wall in the hallway. We just stood there, silently looking at each other. In the end, he sighed and walked toward me. He reached out, like he used to pat my head, but I moved away. What? Are you afraid of me now? He frowned. You're being this guarded with me now? Felipe, I have a boyfriend, so it's not appropriate for us to have this kind of close contact anymore, contact that might be misunderstood. I didn't want to fall into the trap of assuming he liked me just because of a small gesture. That chapter had ended. Even if we were like brother and sister, there needed to be some boundaries. Felipe clenched his jaw, the corners of his lips twitching. You ungrateful little thing. How long have you been with him that you're already defending him like this? Do you like him that much? I just think I should respect this relationship. And showing respect means pushing me away? Felipe. I called his name. In the past, when Fiona and the others called him Felipe, I would always softly call him by his first name. But after the last time, I started calling him Felipe. I think my actions made my feelings clear. You were the one who said that girls who make the first move lose their value. Did you forget? He let out a frustrated laugh. You're still holding a grudge? It's not a grudge. I stepped past him. I just don't like you anymore. Chapter 11. After that day, I didn't see Felipe for a long time. I would occasionally hear people say that the project he and Julia were working on was a huge success. They said the two of them were a powerful team and that something good was bound to happen between them soon. I didn't care much and spent most of my time in the dorm working on my thesis. The rest of my time was spent with Jacob. He introduced me to his friends and told me about the project he and his senior colleagues were working on. Sometimes, when they were busy, I'd quietly sit in their office, working on my own stuff. He would occasionally bring me a blanket to keep warm or prepare some snacks for me. During meetings, if I so much as coughed, he'd discreetly hand me honey water, then continue with the meeting. It seemed like he never refused any request I made. I became immersed in his warmth, and gradually, I understood what Fiona meant when you're surrounded by love. You don't think about anything else. The day before New Year's, Jacob gave me a gift. It was a necklace, though it couldn't compare to the one I had before. I knew it was the best he could afford at the moment. He also handed me a bank card. What's this? There's 500,000 in it. I'm repaying part of the money I owe you. I was shocked. Jacob, where did you get so much money? Meeting my gaze, he slipped the card into my bag. The game we released blew up after we advertised it on social media. This is part of the profit. I knew about the project they were working on, but I hadn't expected such a small game to bring in so much money. There's no rush, I said. To me, that money was just the cost of a bag. I wanted him to keep investing in his business. As if he knew what I was thinking, he smiled. I've kept enough for myself. Don't worry about me. My grandma is being well taken care of too. I accepted his repayment. But suddenly, I had a thought. Since our relationship started because of money, would it end once he finished paying me back? Chapter 12. Come on, girl. Don't tell me you've really fallen for Jacob. I thought about it. Fiona shook my shoulders. Really? I thought again. Liking someone didn't seem like such a difficult thing, so I nodded. Images of Jacob filled my mind. He was a calm, gentle person, always patient with me. Aside from his startup friends, there were no other girls around him, and he always made sure to keep a respectful distance from others. I had heard my roommates describe him as a high mountain flower. I used to think he must be cold and difficult to approach. But once I got to know him, I realized he had a warmer side too. In the empty corridors or the garden with the swaying tree shadows, Jacob would often hold me so tightly that it felt like I could barely breathe. But we had never kissed. What did you say? You two have been dating for almost 6 months and still haven't kissed? Is he, like, not capable? That's not it, I guess. It just seemed like he respected me. Fiona quickly returned to a serious expression. Okay, enough of that, Alice. You have to understand the gap between your families. Not to mention the fact that your relationship started off, well, kind of complicated. Look at the stories in the news, men from modest backgrounds marrying rich girls, and then walking away with half their fortune. It's fun for now, but before graduation, I think you should break up. Don't get too deep into this. If you really like this type, you can always find someone else to take care of later. I wanted to say something to argue, but then I realized that, at some point, Felipe had appeared behind us, and maybe it was my imagination, but I thought I saw the corner of his lips curl into a smirk. What was he smiling about? Chapter 13. As soon as I got home for New Year's, my mom dragged me next door. In the past, both families always spent holidays together. Your Felipe is sick, running a fever. Go upstairs and bring him some water while I help your aunt. I was pushed toward the staircase, holding a glass of water, but I had just seen him last night, and he seemed perfectly fine. How could he be sick all of a sudden? When I knocked and entered his room, Felipe was lying in bed with a fever patch on his forehead, looking pale. It seemed like he really was sick. I walked over and called his name, Felipe. He raised his hand, and I quickly passed him the water. Are you feeling any better? His fingers brushed mine, and his temperature was indeed high. Startled, I quickly let go of the cup. Lowering my eyes, I noticed he seemed a bit unhappy. Still, he pointed to the table. I got you a gift. You really don't have to, Alice. His tone grew more serious. Suddenly, he started coughing. I reached out to pat his back. He grabbed my hand. Since when do you refuse a gift from your brother? I sighed internally. Felipe used to give me gifts on every occasion, big or small, but what? Now that you have a boyfriend, you're ditching your brother too? He kept emphasizing the word brother. It made me wonder if I was overthinking things again. Okay, thanks, Felipe. How have you been lately? He asked. Just as my phone rang, it was Jacob calling. I turned to take the call. Jacob asked if I had time in the afternoon. The stray cat we had rescued had finally found a home, since our family lunch would only be at noon. I said I had time. Jacob said he'd take me out to dinner that evening, and I agreed. After hanging up, I noticed Felipe's face had darkened slightly, but soon, he regained his earlier composure and smiled. So, not joining them for the flower arrangement this afternoon? I pressed my lips together and nodded. Chapter 14. At the dinner table, my mom brought up the topic of Felipe and Julia. She asked if the two of them were dating. Felipe was quick to deny it. No, we're just working on a project together. My mom smiled. Julia is a great girl. You should hurry, or some other guy might swoop in. Right after she said that, Felipe's eyes landed on me. I wasn't sure what he was thinking. Felipe's mom laughed too. You shouldn't just worry about Felipe. You should also think about Alice. She's already 22. I quickly put my chopsticks down, waving my hands. I've got it under control. Look at how scared the kid is. I was just about to say that Dominic. He has good looks and character. No, not Dominic. That boy's a bit too single-minded. Kind of clueless, my mom said with a grin. At that very moment, Dominic, relaxing at the Hot Springs Hotel with Fiona, sneezed. After dinner, I excused myself to leave, but Felipe decided to come back with my dad, saying he needed to trim the garden's grass. I went upstairs to pack my things. As I passed the room where I kept gifts, I paused for a moment. Then I placed the gift Felipe had just given me inside, without opening it. When I headed downstairs, I heard my dad shout. I rushed over. Alice, call the ambulance. Your brother Felipe hurt his foot. Chapter 15. At the hospital. Felipe looked at me apologetically. It's been too long since I last used that machine. Busy. Huh? I glanced at his bandaged foot. Not knowing what to say, I checked my phone instead. Jacob had sent a message saying I should handle things and not worry. He also asked if I needed him to come to the hospital to help. Is there something important? If you have other things to take care of, go ahead. I can manage, Felipe said, ever the considerate one. I looked at his injury. Honestly, he didn't really need me, did he? When you leave, could you help me get a bottle of water? He smiled. I might have trouble moving around later. There's still some work I didn't finish, and I forgot my laptop. Alice, could you bring it for me? My mom called, reminding me to take good care of Felipe since he got hurt helping my dad. But something just didn't feel right. Why was everything so convenient? Felipe, did you do this on purpose? Did you purposely make sure I wouldn't leave your sight today? Felipe froze. He hadn't expected me to bluntly and directly call him out like that. But, as calm as ever, he curled his lips into a smile. Is that really what you think of me? It's hard not to think that way. And what exactly would I gain from doing that? I was left speechless, as if trapped in the same old knot. I treat you like a sister. I don't like you that way. So what would be my reason for doing this? My mind was a bit muddled, and I forced a smile. I'll call a servant to bring you your laptop, and hire a caregiver, so it'll be easier for you to manage trips to the bathroom. Felipe, I've got plans with my boyfriend. I'm leaving now. As soon as I closed the door, I thought I heard something shatter behind me. Chapter 16. The days passed by, one after another. Felipe and I both tacitly agreed not to mention what happened that day. Jacob mentioned that they would likely spend the new year at the office. They had a new project they were rushing to launch before the holiday. At the same time, they were still working on a game they'd started a year ago. It was an Otome game, and Jacob was the lead planner. I laughed. Jacob, no wonder you're so good to your girlfriend. It's because you've studied what girls want, right? He laughed too. Well, does my girlfriend have any interest in helping us spot areas for improvement? You know, for some of the character settings, we're working off pure imagination and research. So during that time, I became a hired consultant, helping them refine the plot lines. I soon realized that this project had a lot of potential. So, in a bold move, I said I wanted to invest in them. Jacob disagreed. It was the first time he had ever refused me. Why? If I invested in them, they would have the funds to speed up the development. Alice, I'm already so grateful to you. When I was at my lowest, you helped me. You saved me from being crushed by life, allowed me to keep my family, to keep studying, and to keep pursuing my startup. I've climbed out of that difficult time, and my life is steadily improving. I have you now, and I treasure our days together. I don't want you to give any more for my sake. You took the first step. Now let me walk the rest of the way towards you, step by step, okay? It was the first time I had ever heard him say so much about us. My heart felt warm, but I was still stubborn. Jacob, I'm betting that you'll prove me right. I'm betting my investment will pay off. And so, I signed the investment agreement and took a 10% share in their company. Chapter 17. On the day school let out for winter break, Fiona suggested we all go get tattoos. I refused. I'm scared of the pain. I don't want one. She turned her gaze to Dominic. Dominic glanced over at Jacob. In the end, neither Fiona nor I got a tattoo, but Dominic and Jacob ended up lying on the tattoo beds. Dominic let out squeals like a pig. Fiona breathed a sigh of relief. Good thing I listened to you and didn't get one. Otherwise, it would have been me in pain. Dominic, so? When the tattoo artist came out, I finally saw what Jacob had gotten. He had tattooed my name on his side. The skin around the tattoo was still slightly red. Without thinking, I reached out to touch it. The moment my fingertips brushed against his lean waist, Fiona, quick as lightning, snapped a picture. TSK, TSK, TSK. Full of sexual tension, I quickly tried to pull my hand back, but Jacob caught my fingers, giving me a slightly possessive look. A tingling sensation shot through my entire body. On the other side, Dominic shouted. Fiona, you traitor! Why aren't you paying attention to me? I'm dying from the pain. Fiona posted the picture on her social media. A lot of friends commented below it. I received a private message from Felipe. It was just a question mark. I didn't reply, because Fiona and I were already on a plane for our trip. Chapter 18. A week later, I returned and dove headfirst back into game development. After all, I'd invested in it. By the time I went back home again, it was already New Year's Eve. I quickly finished dinner and escaped back to my room under Felipe's murderous gaze. I started working on my study abroad applications on my computer. Yes, that had always been the plan. In the past, I didn't want to take over the family business because I was too young and immature. But after spending time with Jacob and seeing how he and his team worked passionately toward their goals, I felt inspired. I wanted to become an accomplished adult too. Maybe noticing that I wasn't planning to come back downstairs, my mom called me, but it was Felipe's voice I heard on the other end. Are you avoiding me? I hesitated. Since our last unpleasant conversation, we hadn't spoken for a while. I stared at my computer and slowly replied, no, on my tablet. Jacob's message popped up. I'm at my senior's place. I'll be done by 8 p.m. Do you have any plans later? I turned on speaker mode so I could free my hands to reply, no plans. I'll come pick you up later. Then, maybe Felipe had heard the notification sound, as his tone turned colder. Texting your boyfriend again? I gave a nonchalant hum in response. Felipe, you guys have fun. I won't be joining. Happy New Year. You don't want this year's gift either? I paused. For as long as I could remember, every New Year's Eve after dinner, I would spend the night with Felipe and his friends. We would set off fireworks and stay up late, exchanging New Year's gifts. And every year, I would leave a little piece of my youthful affection in the gifts I gave him. But now, it didn't seem necessary. It felt too ambiguous, and I didn't like ambiguity. So, I gripped the phone tightly and slowly said, thank you, Felipe. But I'm 22 now. Not a kid anymore. I don't need the gift. I could hear his friends' voices in the background. What's wrong? Little Alice isn't coming? You don't get it. She's spending time with her boyfriend. Didn't you see Fiona's post? Oh, almost 30 and I still don't understand these young people. I heard something drop to the floor. Felipe. The gift you were going to give Alice just fell. I couldn't see Felipe's expression, but I could sense the atmosphere was heavy. So, I said, I'm going to hang up now. Have fun. After hanging up, I replied to Jacob's message, what's the plan? He responded almost immediately, taking you to the outskirts to set off fireworks. Can you come out? I can. I rushed to my room to change. And, of course, I prepared the New Year's gift I had for Jacob. He's always been the one giving. Today, I wanted to let him know he was getting something too. Chapter 19. Brilliant and magnificent fireworks lit up the sky. It felt like a spectacular confession. Such a beautiful scene, perfect for a kiss. Jacob pulled me closer by the waist. His gentle, tender kisses slowly spread downward. Two clumsy people, kissing for the first time. Our teeth occasionally bumping into each other. Jacob started off soft, but soon it felt like he was about to lose control. He held the back of my head, his other hand gripping my waist, pressing me tightly against his chest. Our heartbeats synced, almost thumping out of our chests. His kisses became domineering, intense, making me almost lose my balance. I had to cling to his neck for support. I could feel the surge of hormones sweeping through us. Then, suddenly, a sharp ringtone broke the moment. Jacob and I stopped and turned. Standing in the shadows was Felipe, his expression dark and unreadable. Jacob placed a protective hand on my head, pulling me into his embrace, usually so gentle and calm. This was the first time I'd ever seen Jacob angry. He raised an eyebrow at Felipe. What's the matter? Do you have a habit of spying on people? For some reason, Felipe looked like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode. His breathing was heavy, as if trying to calm down on the brink of losing control. He reached out his hand toward me. Alice, come here. I didn't move. His jaw clenched, and there was a brewing storm in his eyes. Are you going to come over yourself? Or do I need to carry you? Or maybe you'd prefer your parents finding out what you're up to right now? I stared at him silently. Felipe, are you threatening me? Kissing my boyfriend, isn't that normal? He slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he stormed toward us. And then, without warning, he punched Jacob in the face. Chapter 20. They had a fight. My parents found out about my relationship and put me under house arrest. I protested, but it was useless. You don't even know him. Why are you dismissing him? He's an amazing person, my dad said. Alice, don't try to make a mistake. The gap between you two is too wide. It won't work. My mom added, this is your first relationship, and I understand how you feel. But Alice, you're my only daughter. I just want to see you with someone we know well. Felipe said, you two come from different worlds. I sneered. Felipe, are you happy now? Is this the result you were hoping for? I'm doing this for your sake. I don't need it. I'm an adult now. I can make my own decisions. He remained extremely patient, though a hint of obsession flickered in his eyes. Don't you understand? If it weren't for the money between you two, he wouldn't be with you. You wouldn't have crossed paths. At that moment, I was certain the last incident had been deliberate on his part. So, what? Felipe reached out to touch my face. So, break up with him, and then we can be together. Weren't you the one who used to cling to me all the time? I slapped his hand away. Did you forget how you rejected me? You said I wasn't your type. Yes, he replied without hesitation. I regret it. I don't want to see you with someone else. I love you. I threw all the gifts he'd ever given me into their garden. Then I laughed. You know, Felipe, I don't quite understand. If you really loved me, how could you have rejected me? You only feel regret because the girl who used to follow you around has disappeared. And it makes you uncomfortable because I was the one who confessed. And you were the one who rejected me. You think the person who should be cool and indifferent should be you. You think I should be heartbroken, clinging to you, not moving on to a new relationship 6 months later. He shook his head in confusion. No, that's not it. Felipe, you were the one who said, girls shouldn't be too forward. It makes them look cheap. So now, you'll just have to watch me fall in love with someone else. Chapter 21. When Julia came to see me, I was quite surprised. I've only met Felipe a few times. We're not actually together. If there had been any feelings between us, we would have gotten together long ago. It felt like she was saying this to me but also to herself. Julia sighed. Felipe likes you. These days, it seemed like everyone was telling me the same thing. And so what? What does that have to do with me? I didn't want to entertain the conversation. He rejected me himself, said I was like a sister, and now he's saying he likes me? Doesn't he find himself ridiculous? Julia agreed. That's why I said he deserves to lose you. Anyone could see how different he is with you, but he couldn't see it himself. I pursed my lips and said nothing. I remembered that night in the rain, the way Felipe looked at me with such unfamiliar impatience. If someone likes you, would they look at you like that? He used to think that being family was better than being lovers, because once you fall in love, you face arguments, adjustments, even the risk of breaking up. He didn't want to lose you. He didn't want to ruin that relationship. So he kept things the same. But what he forgot is that even family members eventually grow apart and start their own lives. And once that bond is broken, there's no going back to the way it was. So when he saw you with someone else, he couldn't sit still anymore. He regretted it. Julia was analyzing his feelings. But I didn't care anymore. I'm not here to speak on Felipe's behalf, she added. She just wanted me to see things clearly, to be certain of my choice. Sometimes, when someone misses their chance, it's just gone. But what you have now, that's what's most precious, isn't it? In life, if you don't take a chance, that's what you'll regret. Alice, don't be like me. As she left, she handed me a letter. It was from Jacob. Chapter 22. My parents wouldn't let Fiona or Dominic visit me, so they had to send the letter through Julia. Inside was a bank card. Just like before, Jacob had paid me back double the amount. Alice, I've been very happy during the time we've been together, But I also understand the gap between us, my family, my career, in the eyes of the world. None of it matches you. At first, I thought maybe you were just playing with me or using me as a way to make someone else jealous. And I accepted that because I couldn't refuse you. I've liked you for many years. You're such an amazing, adorable girl. Who wouldn't like you? Alice. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, not only for saving me from a tough situation but also for fulfilling my wish to be with you. Alice. I love you, and I want you to be happy. Please don't fight for me, okay? If one day I'm worthy of you, I'll come back for you. If you choose someone else, I'll still wish you the best, because you deserve the best. Chapter 23. I was sent abroad earlier than planned, as everyone had hoped. I didn't contact Jacob again, so I regained my freedom. Felipe would fly out to see me every week, traveling across great distances just to be with me. Like countless times before, he cooked for me, watched TV with me, and prepared everything I needed. But inside, I no longer felt anything. I silently accepted it all, because fighting back wouldn't bring me any benefits. Day after day, I threw myself into studying as if my life depended on it. I thought, if I became strong enough one day, then I would have the right to choose. So I began to engage with the family business. I put away all my distractions and worked hard to become better. My parents were pleased, saying I had finally matured. Felipe was happy too, saying we had plenty of time ahead of us. Everyone seemed to be happy, so why wasn't I? I would only think of Jacob when I was exhausted from studying. He used to help me highlight key points, hand me a glass of water when I coughed, and let me sleep in his arms when I was tired. Whenever I looked at him, the love in his eyes was always there for me, unconditionally. I sniffed. I took out my phone, staring at Fiona's social media feed. Would he remove my name from his skin? Now that he had repaid all the money, would he forget me? Chapter 24. By the second year, I had fully grasped the intricacies of the family business. I had also taken over the operations of the company's overseas branch, achieving excellent results. Julia, along with Fiona and Dominic, came to celebrate with me. Congratulations on the birth of our new boss lady. I grinned widely. Congratulations to me for becoming the next Julia. That night, we talked and talked, covering so many topics. When we got drunk, Fiona said, Jacob's team launched several small game apps, and they all went viral. Their small company now has hundreds of employees. The female-oriented game they launched last week topped the charts. He's amazing. The air suddenly became still. Jacob. It had been so long since I'd heard his name. Hearing it made my heart race. I turned my head slightly, and Dominic quickly covered Fiona's mouth. Come on, Alice. Let me toast to you. That night, when everything was coming to an end, Felipe arrived, sitting on the bench outside the apartment building. I told him, Felipe, I don't like you anymore. No matter how many years you've been in my life, I still don't like you anymore. Felipe froze. You still haven't forgiven me, have you? I've forgiven you, but I don't like you anymore. I once thought I'd like you for a lifetime. But look, people change. Is it because you haven't forgotten him? We've grown up together with over 20 years of feelings. Doesn't that compare to the 6 months you spent with him? His eyes reddened as he questioned me. Timing in life is so important, whether too early or too late. It affects choices and outcomes. I shook my head. Felipe, you can't compare the two, and it's not even comparable. Julia once said, sometimes when something is missed, it's missed for good. Let's part on good terms. You can still be my brother, but I don't want to be your brother. A tear quietly fell down his cheek. It was like returning to the beginning of the story. Only the roles had been reversed. Felipe, I have someone else in my heart. There's no place for anyone else. Go home. Please don't come looking for me anymore. I stood up and went upstairs without looking back. Chapter 25. In the third year, I completed my studies here, and the business of the overseas branch was thriving. I had also become the topic of praise among parents in our circle. For 3 years, I didn't go back. When Fiona came to help me pack my things, she asked, Are you still thinking about Jacob? I didn't answer. Have you seen him? I shook my head. When I left, my phone was taken away, and I got a new phone and a new number, with my parents and Felipe keeping an eye on me. I had no way of contacting him. The only news I had about him came from the media or from Fiona. Fiona pulled out her phone, opened her gallery, and handed it to me. Every month, he comes here. Even I didn't know. I was completely shocked. Why was I only finding out now? It was because of a post on a popular social platform from another international student. They mentioned frequently seeing a handsome man outside our school, as if he were looking for someone, or maybe just there to take a look. Many people commented, sharing photos, saying they had seen him too at various times over the years. He was always alone. When all the details were pieced together, they said he had been coming for 3 years, never failing, but had never found the person he was waiting for. I covered my face, and the tears started to flow. Chapter 26. As soon as I got off the plane, a notification popped up on my phone. It showed that a large sum of money had been deposited into my bank account. When I saw the company name that made the payment, I realized it. It was from Jacob's company, the one I had invested in years ago. I heard the game they released grossed over $100 million in just 1 week after launch. It became incredibly popular. His achievements over these past few years have made him a rising star, a hotshot young elite. He's always been capable, and I knew it. He didn't let me down. So, is this my share of the profit? At the same time, an unknown number appeared on my screen. For some reason, I had a strong feeling. It was him. My heart raced, and I answered the call. On the other end was Jacob's warm voice, Alice. I've come to find you. If one day I'm worthy of you, I'll come back for you. Do you remember the bet we made 3 years ago? Jacob, I bet on you making me win. Bet that my investment would pay off. His voice was clear and deep, pleasing to the ear. And over the past 3 years, all the letters I never sent, would you like to see them? All of them were addressed to you. Turn around. End.